We'll go ahead and kick it back off.
Oh, now we are. Perfect. Well, hi all. Welcome this afternoon to Goodbye Surprise Hello Sales. I am Marnie Stockman of Lifecycle Insights and excited to have Taylor McDonough from GreatAmerica Financial. I will get that wrong 4 times. GreatAmerica
You're all good.
So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. And don't feel bad about that. We have some people call in thinking we are an amusement park. There's a GreatAmerica amusement park. So sometimes we'll get calls in and they'll be like, what times are you open today? How much are your tickets? And I'm like, unless you want to lease equipment, I think you have the wrong number.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
They should make you an amusement park in the office.
They should.
Like, there's an obligation there. I feel like there's an obligation there that's been met.
Yeah. I'll pass that on up to leadership.
Right.
Thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Taylor McDonough, and I am a vendor relationship manager here at GreatAmerica Financial. Just a little overview of GreatAmerica, if you're not aware of it. We're a 29-year-old equipment finance company headquartered in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and we have a business unit that was born in the channel, and we create customized solutions for our MSP partners.
Perfect. Well, we're glad to have you. And Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So Alex Farling, Lifecycle Insights. I'm one of the co-founders over here, helping take this quarterly business review and VCIO platform to the next level. But really where I come from and my relationship with GreatAmerica is that I ran an MSP for 16 and a half years, and I was a GreatAmerica partner, and I had an amazing rep over there. Don't tell Cam I said that, who took care of everything I ever needed. And we actually used them both on the copier side and on the equipment, on the IT equipment side, through my tenure with my relationship with GreatAmerica. So all good things. They taught me some cool things about selling hardware as a rental and all those cool things that we're going to talk about today. So just from my perspective, GreatAmerica is somebody who I've been working with for, I'm going to say, nearly a decade, and love working with them. So great to have you here today.
So I am going to pop up the agenda. So we're going to, it's really going to be fairly conversational, but we do have some talking points just because we could all spin on this topic for quite a while, right? And how to kind of help MSPs with sales. So we're going to check out some trends in the industry and how to stay ahead of them and what outcomes we're going to get by doing those things. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. And Taylor, I think I'm handing this one over to you, right? We're going to talk about trends in the industry. What are you seeing based on kind of the couple of bullet points we have up here?
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of to set the scene, we're seeing this more and more that customer and employee retention is moving in the wrong direction. And like most businesses out there today, hiring and retaining employees has been a big challenge with the Great Resignation. But aside from just employees, we're also seeing that customer retention is moving in the wrong direction as well, which really isn't a surprise when you think about all the changes and challenges that we've seen over the last few years. We have the supply chain issue caused a ton of challenges for MSPs, especially when trying to set expectations for their customers and provide a seamless experience. And aside from that, there's also an increase in more competition coming into the market. Private equity firms are really buying up companies left and right, and these PE firms continue to invest in the channel. And as they continue to invest, there are larger MSPs with more sales and more marketing resources, just expanding into new geographical markets. So you're likely seeing more and more mature competition seep into these markets that you may not have previously seen before. And because of this, today we're really going to be focused a lot on creating stickier clients and setting your MSP up to protect their future customer base.
Well, as these private equity companies come in, what we find is MSPs who are just less, we kind of talk about the evolution of an MSP, right? Your first year in business, you'll take any customer. All revenue is good revenue. But throughout the evolution, you kind of see the MSP get pickier about their customer. These private equity companies are picky about their customer from day one. And at onboarding, they can change everything that doesn't meet their standard and literally just go steamroll an environment and replace what is in the way. So smaller MSPs, in order to stay competitive with these clients or in order to bring in these types of clients, they need the same tools to make the client sticky, to be able to refresh all that outdated hardware, to be able to do the things the big boys are doing without having private equity money behind them, because otherwise they're going to have to get gobbled up by somebody just to stay competitive. And at the end of the day, the mature MSP is really the MSP, not who is necessarily better at the technology, but they're better at interacting with that client, finding ways to make their business be smoother, and just make it a more comfortable, more frictionless experience for the customer. Sometimes that's we replace a bunch of hardware. Sometimes that's we just interact with them on a different level. But MSPs, the smaller MSPs, really need to be looking at what the big boys are doing, be aware of it, that you've got more mature competition in your marketplace, and figure out how you're going to handle it. And I think we'll talk about some of the tools today that GreatAmerica brings to the table to be able to do that.
Well, one thing. Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, no, you go first, Marnie.
Well, I was just going to say, in the market, one thing everybody loves is some 3-letter acronyms. So
Right.
I was just going to introduce the notion of SLI and OML and let you kind of talk through this piece.
Yep. I got to learn these acronyms just like everyone else. But yeah, before we wanted to dive in too deep, just wanted to quickly touch on this acronym as well, which is OML. We're going to be referencing this a little bit in our time today. So just wanted to make sure those who aren't benchmarking with service leadership have kind of an understanding of what OML is and what we're talking about when we say best in class. So as you know, OML stands for operational maturity level, which essentially just measures your organization's ability to execute a best in class business plan. So if you fall on OML scale 1, you don't know what you don't know, and it's just trial and error. By OML 3, you have basic controls and you're likely doing some forward budget planning. And by the time you're OML 4 and 5, you have robust controls, you have detailed forward budgeting and attainment tracking, and your comp plans are tied to driving those goals. So when we talk about best in class MSPs, we're really referring to those who are at OML 4 and 5.
And they're typically the ones who are making the best profit margins, right? At the end of the day, these are the folks that have it dialed in. They know which numbers drive sales, which numbers drive revenue. They know how to grow the business, but they also know how to retain clients and make those retained clients profitable.
Perfect. I think that's a good place to start, especially in a world of acronyms. So thank you for that.
What we really need to know is profitability. Yeah.
How do we go about addressing the trends?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm taking this one. So when we talk about what the best in class MSPs are doing today in order to stay ahead of the industry challenges like customer and employee retention, how are they doing this today? And they're really focused on retention and protecting their future customer base. Even if the best in class MSPs aren't seeing a lot of customer churn right now, they understand that there's more competition than ever into the market. And the best way to combat that and protect their future customer base is to really invest in retention. But they also understand that it's way cheaper to retain a current customer versus continually needing to bring on new. Paul Dipple of Service Leadership shared that on average, MSPs spend $23,000 in sales and marketing to onboard a single managed services client, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's just an insane number. But when you think about all the resources, your sales resources, marketing resources, campaigns, different things like that, I can kind of believe it.
I believe it. We did the math at my MSP and the number was about 17,000. And that was because we had owner-led selling. We weren't paying big commissions and comps and things like that to go bring somebody in. So we knew why we were below best in class on that number. So if you're doing owner-led selling, you're probably a little under that number. The other thing I would say is the average MSP doesn't even know what this number is. They don't know this number in their MSP. So I would challenge you to figure that out, to go kind of work through that. And it's a challenging exercise because you've got to come up with all the sales and marketing that goes into it. But on top of that, the salaries and the time and the energy and the tools that go into giving all those pitches, and you have to calculate in the ones that you lose in with the ones that you win to figure out, hey, as an owner, 60% of my time went into sales, and that's a big chunk of my salary. So, but it also goes with the old adage that the cheapest customer is the one you already own, right? The customer you've already got is the cheapest one to keep. So, we always talked about this at my MSP when we would go deliver a risk assessment. And the thing that really gave us the ability to bring in a new client was that we would lead with risk. We would go show the customer kind of where they're starting at today and where they would be in a couple of years or in a couple of months once they worked with us. And I always used to have this conversation with them. And, we'd lay out a risk assessment and say, you've matched 40% of our best practices or 45% of our best practices. And I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you're getting exactly what you're paying for with your former provider. The bad news is you're getting exactly what you're paying for with your former provider. And they'd kind of scratch their head and I'd go, you see the gap between this 45 you scored and the 95 on this next assessment? Well, the 95 is where you're going to live when I bring in all my tools and bring all my weapons to bear. And oh, by the way, that firewall that you've got at the, at the gate that is 4 years old and about to go end of life and not really supportable to us, we'll just replace it for you. And those 3 Windows 7 laptops you've still got, we'll just replace them for you. And it's all rolled into the monthly payment. And you're going to be looking at, you were spending $2,000 a month with your old provider. We're going to be $4,400, but we solve for all of this problem, and we replace old hardware, and we solve for these problems that you've got that you don't even know where they land in your budget coming up. And you could close a lot of business with a conversation like that, because your customers really just want you to make it simple and easy to understand. Here's pain. Things are broken where I live today. Everything's green over here. I can move to that and just write a check to make it go away. Right. And if we can do that, we can enable the business to move so that the business can make money and they can afford to pay us.
So Taylor, you brought up one thing that I'd like to just point back out is you said, so a lot of folks will say there's not a lot of churn, right? We don't lose a lot of clients, but you didn't word it that way. You said mature OML folks know to look for churn potential, even if it's not actually there. And I think that's an important point. If you're not proactively thinking about it, you will get blindsided should it happen. And just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not a possibility. So I liked the way you said that. I wanted to just double point that out.
And we're seeing it across our partner base right now. I was just earlier on the Ninja Live chat, I mentioned a partner that we have who had a customer who they thought was a fairly happy customer. Through no fault of their own, a leadership member changed, brought in their favorite IT guy from their last employment and replaced them on the spot. The guy says, I'm month to month. About every 5 years, I lose a big contract and I regret that. And the rest of the time I feel like it's okay. And we're doing the right thing by our customers. But, he lost $20,000 a month on no notice. But what we are seeing is, where your retention might have been, or your bleed might have been 3 clients or 3% a year. We're seeing that nearly double right now across our client base. Our clients are talking about this more and more, how there's a big account at risk, or there's a big account that's left because of COVID, or because of a staffing change or something else. We're just seeing more and more of it than we've ever seen before. And I think that leads into why this next slide is so important.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've already gotten us here, but so how do we address it with customer experience?
Yeah. So as we were putting this deck together, Taylor and I kind of went back and forth on this one. And, the original slide was, the customer experience starts at onboarding. And I kind of challenged and said, in my mind, the customer experience starts in the sales process. And, a non-salesperson would answer it the other way. I'm just a dumb sales guy and I don't know any better, but in my sales pitch, I'm going to a customer and saying, I understand the experience you have today, and I'm sorry that it's less than perfect. But if you were working with me, this is what the experience would feel like. And there's some psychology in that. It's the car salesman going, Taylor, you're going to look great driving this convertible red sports car, right? And you start to envision yourself in it, and you go, I'm going to look good in that car. And you're ready to take the top down a day like today. You're ready to take it around the block, and you're already thinking about it. You've mentally started to buy that car before you ever bought that car. And we're doing the same thing with our clients. We're going, hey, we're with our prospects, and we're saying, hey, I understand you have a relationship with your current guy. And I'm sure that when he presents you your budget, it's in a way that you can understand it and that it makes sense to you. When I give you a budget, Mr. Customer, it's going to look like this. And I just want to make sure that you're comfortable working in the formats that we work in. And what they're going to do is they're going to take one look at the budget and go, my guy never gave me a budget. And I'm like, well, when you work with us, we give you one of these every quarter. We do a quarterly business review. It feels like this. We replace hardware, before it's a problem. We do these other, and they start to envision what life could be like if it weren't the reason that they called you in the first place. So, it's one of those things where I think if you start that early in the process, you also get to set up your first quarterly business review, or that first strategic technology touch, before you've ever closed the contract. And you're going, hey, 90 days in, once we finish your onboarding, we're gonna have another one of these meetings, but we'll have more information, we'll have more detail, we'll be able to have a better conversation, but it kind of looks like this. And I really like setting up that customer experience before onboarding, but it carries into onboarding. And that's the other piece of this, is that at onboarding, these really mature MSPs are coming in and replacing all the hardware that's out of date. And that customer experience starts right there with, hey, I got a new provider, and holy crap, they gave me a fast computer. Everything's wonderful. I've got 2 monitors now. I can do everything that I want and need to do.
So Taylor, I'm curious, You said that Alex said you kind of started in different places here. Did he sway you one way or the other? Was it kind of the same thing?
Got my sales pitch out. Yeah.
He definitely pitched me on it, and I definitely am in that boat too.
Okay.
It was really interesting hearing him talk about it starting before the customer or before the onboarding, because I mean, it's so true. And especially as there's competition out there trying to kind of dig their claws into new prospects and different things like that, it's super important to make sure that customer experience starts at day one, not just once you've gotten them to sign the papers. So I thought that was really interesting. So I asked him a little bit more about it and how Lifecycle Insights helps with that. So it was really interesting to learn a little bit more about that. And Alex, I'm curious from your standpoint as well, when you were at your MSP or you owned your MSP, what did that best-in-class onboarding look like with your clients? How did you get them up to your standards as fast as possible?
Well, some of that was replacing hardware right out the door, making sure that we didn't leave old gear out there. We did a lot of HAAs, and we didn't sell it as hardware as a rental. We just did a lease to our customers, where I didn't care about the semantics of it so much as just getting them the right gear. But we jumped right into, hey, you've got a bunch of gear here, and it's I can charge you a $20,000 project, or I can charge you $600 a month. Which one of those is easier for you to swallow? Now, I know I don't like to pay finance charges, but I don't like to write $20,000 checks either. You've dug into a technology debt hole here. Which of these is easier for you to swallow? And we would go whichever way the customer wanted. I wasn't going to push it either direction, but we had a surprising number of folks just jump right on it and go, $600 a month, I can swallow that. Let's go. I never have to write another $20,000 check. Life is good, because the customers hate those surprises. So between that, knowing that we were going to replace everything that caused us problems on the way in the door, and then the other thing that let me do was spend less time onboarding and trying to get up to speed on old crappy gear. So when I would send my engineer on site, and we would have at least a week of dedicated on site for every onboarding, that engineer had to be there probably 30% less time, because he didn't have to document a bunch of old gear. We were able to just, swap out and replace anything that we weren't comfortable supporting. So it really left us with a better experience and our customer in a better place. And it was very obvious to them the minute we hit the ground running. We really hit the ground running. And 90 days in, when we had our first meeting, we had full budgets, we had really good documentation, we had network diagrams, we knew who and what we were supporting. And they finally knew what we were supporting. A lot of them were really surprised when we went, oh, did you know your door access control system is on the guest Wi-Fi? No clue about it, right? And we were able to go in and spend time doing scans and diagrams and things like that we otherwise would have had to be chasing down bad hardware or old hardware or stuff that was going to cause us problems.
In terms of consistency, that's the Southwest way, right? As someone that just traveled on the exit row, I can tell you they're all 737 Boeings, right? because they only had to learn how to fix one type, right? We can swap pieces and parts out easily. So yeah, that does make for the consistency, makes for profitability in that regard.
Yeah.
Best in class.
Yep, another acronym.
Yeah, perfect. I put that one in the chat. When I saw the slide, I was like, BIC, okay.
Right. But this is those highly mature customers, right? And Taylor, I think you had a good conversation with Paul Dipple on this, so I'll let you kind of talk through this a little bit, and then I'll step in. But I think Paul Dipple is the smartest guy in most of the rooms he walks into, so his opinion, even secondhand, carries more weight than mine.
Well, I mean, he has all the data of all these MSPs too. So I mean, he's looking at the real statistics, and I mean, this is just simple data. So he outlined that the best-in-class MSPs today have 70% of their customer base on their fullest managed services package and are the best in standardization when it comes to the hardware and software that they sell. And something that I thought was really interesting was bottom quartile MSPs. So when you think about like OML 1 or 2, they averaged 4,800 tickets per managed services engineer in Q2 last year, whereas the best in class averaged 1,500 tickets per managed services engineer in Q2.
Say those numbers again.
The bottom quartile averaged 4,800 tickets per managed services engineer.
So Marnie, you're the math major. What is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's about a third.
1,400 a month.
Yeah.
What engineer can close 1,400 tickets a month without doing select all, right click, close, right?
Yeah.
That's the only way you get through that volume, right? So what we find is that best in class has actually got it down to a manageable number of tickets so they can actually deliver to the customer, where bottom quartile, the lesser mature MSPs, still have a bunch of noise coming out of their systems, don't have standardization, and are getting garbage tickets that they can't possibly manage, and are only skimming the high visibility stuff off the top and working with their customers, right? And if you're in one of those MSPs, you know which RMMs are screaming at you and dumping a bunch of garbage into your systems all day. It's one of those things that we're kind of that MSPs fight against. Do we have enough data? Do we have all the data? Where's the happy medium? What stuff can you shut off and it's not going to hurt you down the road? It's a problem, but this points out that best-in-class MSPs have it figured out.
And when you think about employee retention as well, which employee is having a better experience too? Aside from just the customer experience, obviously the customer is getting a better experience, but that engineer as well is going to be super bogged down, hating coming into work every day if they have to manage 4,800 tickets a quarter versus 1,500. So when thinking about employee retention as well, both employees and customers are just going to get a better experience.
I mean, 1,500 tickets is still unmanageable. That's still a significant number of false alerts. But yeah, at my MSP, I thought about it a lot from the productivity side, from the utilization side. Are my engineers doing the work? But we talked about turning down the noise, just so that the important things did bubble to the top. I never thought about it from the perspective of the better workplace that it creates. So to hear that side of it really was an eye opener to me, and I'm sure somebody else on this call will benefit from just the thought of, God, yeah, that's got to suck less for my people not having to go through and clean that stuff up and stay late on a Friday night to calm down the ticket queue so that Monday morning when we come in, life isn't terrible. I remember more than once staying for a ticket closing party.
Oh yeah, here are the statistics.
I was like, in case you didn't get the number,
Yep,
yes,
in case you didn't get them.
1,600 a month per engineer.
But this statistic, I think, matches very closely to the other piece that best-in-class group is also standardizing on hardware. So this isn't just turning the knobs on the tools to get them to be less noisy. This is, hey, in the first 2 or 3 years of its life, a PC is more secure, more stable, more reliable. The more modern operating system is going to create less noise. It's got less age and clutter from being old. So by replacing your hardware on a regular basis and by standardizing and keeping it up to date on a regular rotating life cycle, you're just winding up with an easier to support environment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to have the numbers to back that up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so Taylor's got those numbers.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, when thinking about standardization tying into the customer experience, just wanted to show you a high level overview of what we put together of how long end users tend to keep technology in their doors. So on the left-hand side, you can see there's a partner preference lifespan, which would be you guys as the MSPs, your preference on how long clients keep technology in their doors. And then in the middle, we have the average GreatAmerica term of this type of equipment. So that essentially just displays if your client were to finance their technology, what the typical term length is on that contract. And then on the right-hand side, this shows if a partner were to purchase their gear outright and just own it day one, how long the technology ends up staying in their doors. So you can see by getting a client on a monthly consumption model, they're going to more closely align to your preferred lifespan versus going years past the technology's usable life. So you can even see here, access control or physical security. I mean, those are going almost 5 years in some cases past your preferred usable life. So when thinking about the amount of tickets that's driving up, I mean, it goes back to the slide we were talking to before.
I would love to see these numbers out of Lifecycle Insights after a couple of years of customers rotating equipment through here, because I have the feeling that your partner actuals are actually generous. And that the real numbers are probably worse than that if you look over the hundreds of thousands of assets.
Particularly if you dig into a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
I worked with someone the other day who was talking about a library that he worked with. He's like, I got to convince them that beyond 7 years for a workstation, we really need to do something about that.
It's a doorstop at that point. It's not your technology. But I think, and this is something that we track and that we talk about on a regular basis with our partners, because one of the first steps that we take when we onboard a new partner is to help them build a budget that works for their client. Well, to build the budget, you have to come to terms with this. You have to sit down with your client. And this is maybe one of the most beneficial pieces of budgeting with your clients, is that you have to sit down and have the conversation with them and say, what do you think, Mr. Customer, is a reasonable time frame on which you should replace this kind of equipment? And I get to set my numbers down alongside it and say, hey, I think we should replace every workstation every 48 months. You're going to tell me every 72 months. Now we got to come to somewhere in between, because I can't support 72 months. It's just not going to happen. Your people hate it already. They just aren't willing to tell you. You're probably not going to get to 36 months, which would be the perfect world scenario, which is why I feel like I'm giving already to give you 48. So where's the happy place in the middle, right? And it's a really interesting conversation with your customer, because typically their pushback is, I can't afford to replace it. And I go, well, tell me more about that. What is your annual IT spend? And they go, I don't know. Well, how much does your total lifecycle replacement cost? If you replaced all your assets, I don't know. So if you don't know the total number, you can't possibly give me the total number divided by the number of years we replaced it in and give me your annual number. And you can't possibly tell me what you could afford monthly. So let's step back and look at that. And until we dive into that, our customers are used to just giving us, I can't afford it, because we typically just come to them with a big long invoice and go, hey, I need 20 grand again. Hey, I need 30 grand again. Right? We never come to them, every month and go, hey, your IT spend for this month is going to be $1,800. Your IT spend for this quarter is going to be $4 grand. Right? Nobody, as MSPs, we don't come to them in that fashion. We come to them and go, Windows 10 is about to die. I need $35,000. And they go, I feel like I just bought those things. And one of our partners said he had to tell one of his customers that if I just bought those things was one of their children, it would be walking, talking, and potty trained by now. And they were very mistaken about when they paid that last invoice, right? And our customers really do. They hold on to the pain from us going to them and saying, I need a boatload of money. And they hold on to that and they think it just happened yesterday. And when we really go look, it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And part of that speaks to the damage we're doing to our customer when we go, surprise, I need money, instead of helping them really strategically plan it over time. And that kind of leads up to this slide. And I think this also really talks to that point of, old equipment costs you a ton of money, right? But you never think about the fact that new equipment also costs you a ton of money in the year that it hurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how you talk to your client saying, oh, we don't have the money to replace it after X amount of years. Well, when you see this graph, PCs managed through rotation leasing cost 24% less than PCs that are purchased outright. So on the right-hand side, they rotate their PC every 3 years, so 2 different lease cycles versus 6 years of keeping a PC in your doors. You can see the ebb and flow of year 1, super expensive, and then starts to creep back up, and by year 6, astronomical again, versus 2-3 year lease cycles stays really flat and predictable. So when you talk to budgeting as well and making it more manageable, show them this, and it'll make a ton more sense in their mind as to how it's going to create more predictability and it's going to be more affordable for them.
Well, and
I think I'm going to step in for a second, is when I look at the chart on the left, and I would love to point out that orange is maintained. Don't forget, when your computer is at orange maintain, the user is at annoyed, frustrated, right? Like that's agony, that's work stoppage, that's irritation. So again, talking about customer happiness, or, customer retention, or, their employee retention, that orange is scary way beyond the fact that a computer is costly.
So I want to add one more thing in here. Take year 1 and move it down to year 7. And now what do you have? You have a budget. You have a budget that goes like this with 2 back-to-back really terrible years. Guess when MSPs lose all their customers? Somewhere in the middle of those 2 back-to-back really terrible years, because they're tired of you coming to them and going, I need more money to spend on technology. All we ever do is spend on technology. But also all that orange support cost, you can't pass all of that along to your customer. You eat a big chunk of that. So they experience more downtime. It's all the stuff Marnie was talking about. They have downtime, pissed off users, just a terrible experience. And then after they've had a terrible experience, you make them spend a bunch of money in year 7. But the fact that your 2 worst years kind of stack up on top of each other makes for a really miserable customer experience, a really painful customer experience. And you have to manage that human through that whole process. Mm-hmm. And so that is as telling to me as the fact that you can lease equipment and not, totally bury the budget, when you go through all of this. And, yes, buying equipment twice is more expensive than buying it once. I get it, until you start looking at what it costs to support it. And then you start to break down the technical stuff, which the folks on this call will be very good at, right? And we know that by the time Windows 7 went end of life, it was like 9 times more likely to get malware than Windows 10. Those things really play into those tall oranges on the years 5 and 6. And those all come off of your top line or off of your bottom line revenue. Those are profit being chewed away out of your business. It's not costing your customer anything, but a little bit of downtime for an employee.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add in years 5, 6, and 7, that's when those more mature sales and marketing MSPs are coming in marketing them. So if they're having a bad customer experience, their PCs are running super slow, employees are really frustrated, at that same time, they're getting marketed by more mature MSPs.
That's a great point, because a mature MSP actually will go in and meet with them and say, hey, here's our offering. Let's just have a conversation. The customer will go, I've got a contract for 2 more years. Please go away. And that mature MSP goes out to their car and goes, tickler, put it in the system, reach out to them in 18 months, right? And start marketing to them again. They know exactly when all of your customers' contracts end. And also the mature MSP who's doing those leases, guess what they're doing twice over that period? They're doing contract renewals. When they replace a bunch of hardware with new on a lease, you're not only initiating that lease agreement, but you're also sitting down with your customer and having another strategic conversation, probably adding some security tools, doing these other things that increase your MRR. And at my MSP, when we increased the MRR at all significantly, we just did a contract renewal. You know what? You're happy with us. You're buying more stuff from us. Let's just go ahead and renew you for 3 years. And that way, we can get ahead of any cost increases that come out over the next couple of years. Okay, no problem. Where do I sign? And, I had a customer who had they were a school, and they must have bought $80,000 a year with me through GreatAmerica while I was there. Once they learned that they could lease stuff from me, they leased everything from projectors to you name it through the IT guy, because I was the only one coming to them with that offering. And but every time we'd come in with something new, it was, you want us to go ahead and renew that contract while we're sitting here? And every year they'd sign a new 5-year contract. They were never going away. And leasing kind of just opened the door to that, because we were always in there having a financial discussion about what was going to come end of life this year, what would we add to a new lease, and were we co-terming, and what were we doing with it? And we were there to have real business conversations instead of talking about petaflops and gigabytes and flux capacitors. We were having business conversations. How do we help you make this school run more efficiently, keep the technology up to date, make sure your teachers have a better experience, make sure your students have a better experience? Because at the end of the day, those were their frontline employees and their customers, right? If all of them are having a good experience, the school stays open and life is good. We were, the pastor that ran that school actually said, I see you guys as marketing, not as an expense. Because when we walk into a computer lab, when we're showing a parent the school, I don't have a bunch of beige computers sitting on top of desks with CRT monitors behind them, right? We've replaced everything every couple of years. We have nice big monitors. We have tiny little machines hanging on the backs of the monitors. We got projectors and all this other stuff, and it all works, and it's all dialed in. And they would even have us go overboard, and every summer they'd pay us for a project to go in and do cable management in the computer lab. And we would go into the Velcro and cable up the computer lab real nice, because they understood the value that in 2010, 2012, 2015, technology is selling parents on why they should go pick the school for their kid over another one. And it was not about expenses. It was about, we're in the budget. They knew they had the money for it in the budget. They could flatline it and make it easy.
Well, and you say flatline on the budget, and since I accidentally poked ahead, for a fact, the next slide is more reasons why that consistent budgeting. Well, it shows consistent budgeting is a powerful reason, rather, why folks want to pay monthly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually did a survey of end user technology buyers, and the number one reason that they choose to pay monthly for their technology wasn't because they didn't have enough cash. It was because it provided them with a consistent budget. Something I hear all the time from our MSP partners is, oh, I'll offer financing if my customer doesn't have the money for it, but I know they're really well off. Don't assume how they want to pay for it. That's our biggest piece of advice for all of our partners, is not to assume. Looking at this graph just helps further push the fact that it's not always because they don't have enough cash. They love the consistency of the budget. A few slides ago, we showed, the ebbs and flows of that versus a really flat line, predictable expense.
And we'll talk about that again in a minute. But, the number one thing we see when we talk to our partners is that number one, the budget presentation moves the needle for the customer. It's a wow moment for them when you can sit down and have a budget conversation with them instead of a technology conversation. We ask them to bring in all kinds of stuff into the budget, and we'll go into that on the next slide. But when we have that conversation, it's the first time the customer's ever been able to build a technology budget. And it's important that we include all the things in the budget that could come against the technology accounts, because where we're going to wind up is there's nobody in the customer's organization more capable of building a budget than me, who isn't actually in their organization. And that's where I get back and forth between account management and the CIO level, the CIO role. And that CIO really has to go dig into the customer's account, learn how they run their business, learn what their expenses are, and deliver for them a real budget so that they know what they're even budgeting against. Most of our customers, most small and medium businesses, have no idea what their technology budget ought to be. And they're really looking for their MSP to show them that, even though they're probably not mature enough to tell their MSP that they're looking for the MSP to show them that. And that kind of leads us up to this slide, which is actually a screenshot out of Lifecycle Insights. And this is what a typical technology budget looks like. And first things first, look at the bottom of the rows there that show every year what this customer is spending. Number one, they're $115,000 overdue in technology expense. This is equipment that should have.
I feel like we need to send somebody from GreatAmerica to chat.
This is equipment.
We'll happily do that.
Yeah, but remember a couple slides back, we said we need to sit down with our customer and say, how long are you going to keep a workstation, and get them to commit to us. 5 years is my number. I'll replace them every 5 years, or 6 years is my number. I always goof around in the system and play with it and show people we can do 5.5 years if that's what you and your customer have to come to terms on, right? We can budget on that. That can be done. But what we have here is a customer who has told us what is an acceptable budgetary period to keep a PC, and yet has $79,000 worth of PCs that they've kept too long. And then if we look further down, further down the rows, in 2022, they only need to spend $10,000. 2023, they're spending almost 40. Then they go back down to 10, then back up to almost 40. So you see the sine wave of spend, which isn't the same as that GreatAmerica slide that was showing this, right? This is a spend that looks like this, because what's happened? Well, Windows 7 died. We went and replaced a bunch of machines. Then they suffered shock and didn't spend anything the next year. Then the next year, we got some stuff we should have bought last year. It's probably going into life. We should spend some more money. Then they went into shock again and they stopped. And they tend to do this cyclical thing, and then their budget does this. And the problem is the same as with that GreatAmerica slide. This is going to come back around, and in 2026, they're going to have 2022 spend all over again, and then they're going to start again the expensive cycle. So it continues to be a cycle of pain and reprieve and pain and reprieve. But if you look down the side as well, we're not just accounting for servers and workstations. We're accounting for contracts and subscriptions, as well as remediation planning, recommendations, what we need to do to fix it. Contracts and subscriptions is a big one that most MSPs don't account for. But if you think about it, $100 a month over a period of 60 months, 5 years, is $6,000. A tiny little $100 a month subscription actually costs more than 3 or 4 PCs does over that lifespan. So it is important money that we get it in there, right? That little Adobe subscription, that doesn't seem like very much when you just swipe the credit card every month. Over the long term of the budget really is a pretty big number. So it needs to be included. And I know GreatAmerica does a great job of working with their partners to help include software and licensing and things like that in some of these finance purchases. So a lot of that can be handled on a month-to-month basis, even if you would have had to buy it a year or years in advance in other places. But the last thing that I'll say to the budget point is just that we really need to take a look at this customer from an entire view of all of their technology, right? So we're looking at about $100,000 or $210,000 that this customer spends over a period of 5 years in technology, not just $10,000 or $40,000 or whatever they're willing to chew off now. This customer has $210,000 they need to divide out over 5 years and find a way to flatten and stabilize that budget. And imagine how hard it would be for me to do that, knowing that they already have their first 2 years of budget spend already past due. If we do nothing, they're already behind by 2 years. And this is where leasing lets you catch up. And that was the first conversation I had at that school, was they hadn't replaced anything in a long time. Windows 7 was dying. Every PC they had was Windows 7. And I went, how are we going to address this? And they went, I wish we had been told this was coming 5 years ago. And I went, well, thank God I wasn't your IT guy 5 years ago, but I probably should have told you about it last year. And I've got a great relationship. Would you like to talk to somebody? And they went, oh yes, we would. And after that, it was just off to the races. They replaced everything. And every year they'd find more stuff to bring to us and try and lease. So it was a really great experience. It's a really interesting, experience as you watch the budget kind of ebb and flow. And you had a customer that you guys had worked with who kind of had a similar story to tell, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. We did have a partner who, prior to ever meeting GreatAmerica, this was about a decade ago, they put a bid out for a prospect, and we're in competition with some others within the area. And sounds like the meeting with the incumbent, they created a beautiful spreadsheet, had all these different budget forecasts, but it looked a lot like this. And the end user couldn't envision that easily within their monthly budget. So even though the partner that ended up being a GreatAmerica partner was $500 more per month, they actually won the contract because they were able to provide them with an easy to consume and envision monthly budget versus all these unpredictable capital expenses.
And so we have a partner we're kind of working with, right? Or he's one of our earliest partners, actually. He might have been our first paying customer years and years ago, but he just went out and did a deal where he sat down with the customer and built them a budget as a prospect. And we don't recommend that anybody do that. It's a lot of work. It goes back to that $23,000 to get a new customer. Like, he spent it all staring at their budget and trying to manage their contracts and subscriptions, their recurring bills. And he helped this customer identify about $2,000 in savings in telecom expenses by building a budget, and was able to sell an $8,000 MRR managed services deal just by helping his customer build a budget, because they knew that he understood their business, as opposed to just a guy who turns screws and types really fast and can operate all that fancy stuff that makes noise in the server room, right? So I think this not just sets apart the companies who can make a little bit more money or can keep a more consistent replacement cycle, but it also sets apart the folks who understand your business.
So as I move on, I think what we've said is let's talk budgeting. So Taylor, tell us how folks can talk with GreatAmerica, and really a little bit more even about really what you bring to the MSP.
Well, actually, before we get there, though, we want to talk through a couple of things on that last slide. It was left blank for really blank for a reason. GreatAmerica in their webinar that I watched with Paul Dipple, they had a bunch of really good questions, and I actually phrased a couple of these to some of our partners, and they loved them. So Taylor, do you want to run through some of these and talk through them with your slant on them, and then as the sales guy, I'll kind of give you my take on them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a whole list of discovery questions that you can ask prospects or partners just in initial conversations with them. So when you're talking about financing or leasing with them, don't wait until time of proposal to do so. Start having those conversations early on. Let them know that it's an option, just to get them thinking about it, even if you're not even close to the point of providing them the proposal. In any strategic conversations with them, just ask them, hey, we have, upcoming investments that you're needing to make. Would you benefit in paying for those over time? And then that opens the door to more of the conversation. Another one we ask is, how do you consume your technology today? And at that point, they're going to be like, well, what do you mean by that?
That was my reaction.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of this question, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then you can go into explaining it a little further, thinking about, okay, well, your copiers and printers today, do you just stroke a check for those up front, or are you paying for those via a finance model? 97% of all copiers and printers today are leased. That's GreatAmerica's bread and butter. That's where we started from, and they're leased. Think about phone systems as well. A lot of companies pay for their phone systems on a monthly versus all up front. And so just getting them thinking about how they're consuming their other technology today, say, I understand your financing, copiers, printers, different things like that. Is there a reason you don't have your other technology on a consumption type model like this today? And then going down what that looks like with them. Those are some of the questions that we recommend asking. Other ones are, what are your growth expectations over the next 3 to 5 years? Learning about the investments that they're going to be making If they say, oh yeah, we're actually planning on building a new building or hiring new employees, or we have the marketing campaigns, if that's going to take some cash and working capital for them, say, hey, I understand that you have all these investments to make. Instead of tying up your cash on a depreciating asset like technology that you're going to need to upgrade every 3, 4, or 5 years, utilize that in areas of growth that are going to get you more ROI for your money. So when thinking about it, they might say, oh, financing will cost us anywhere between 6 to 10%. Yes, there is a charge to finance your technology, but when you think about areas that you can invest that cash, what kind of ROI are you going to see? You could see 20, 30% ROI on that cash that you're investing. So just talking through those business conversations with them will tee you up as a more professional business advisor to them, aside from just their IT guy.
And nowadays, inflation is going to chew up that 6% right out the door, right? They don't have to pay for this stuff. They're making payments all the way through as their dollars becoming worth less and less. They're making the same payment to GreatAmerica. So there's a lot of value there too. The sales guy in me kind of presented this with what Sandler calls a negative reverse. And I would always say, you probably don't want to pay those leasing fees or anything. Nobody likes to pay extra fees. But, if this is going to be a major inconvenience to you to have to come up with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 up front, we could always consider leasing. And I would always start having that conversation when I'm having strategic meetings with my client 1, 2, 3 years in advance. And I've dropped that nugget enough times by the time we get there that they're coming to me and saying, hey, tell me more about that payment thing. They don't know if it's hardware as a rental or leasing or hardware as a service or whatever fancy tech industry name you want to put on it, right? They're thinking, I can put my money to work for me. I can go hire that salesperson. I can go do something else with this money as opposed to dropping 40 grand up front. I mean, my God, that pays for my sales guy for his first 4 months of on the job to go out and make me money, and I can pay out this technology over time. So it's really interesting to have the conversation with the customer that if you could keep that 40 grand in the bank or 50 grand in the bank or whatever your number is, what kind of an impact would it have on your business? And might that change your opinion on replacing this gear if you could do it over time with some financing.
Mm-hmm. And something you mentioned yesterday, Alex, too, that I thought was interesting was asking the customer the question, are you going to be prepared to make this investment again 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
Right.
Because I thought that was a really, yeah.
Yep. If we know we're replacing PCs and we know they're a 48-month life cycle shop, are you going to be prepared to drop 40 grand again in 4 years? Because when we buy now, everything we buy together now gets old at the same pace, and it comes back to visit you again. And that's why I say it's that cycle of pain and reprieve that our customers go through when we wait and hold things up and then go have them replace a bunch of stuff all at once and then go do it again. And leasing really takes the pain part out of that.
I don't want to jump the gun again.
Now we can jump the gun.
Okay.
Yes, we're ready now.
Sorry. I saw the single line and thought, oh, that is what we have been discussing, but you're right. There was a lot of meat on that I had. I'm glad we got into.
No worries. No worries.
So Taylor, yeah, if you could talk a bit, and I will cut this.
I got it. I beat you to it.
Thank you. So Taylor, yeah, if you could just give us a rundown.
Absolutely. So if you're wanting to start offering financing or hardware as a service, or you just want to get a little better at it, but really aren't sure where to focus your resources and time to kind of get it off the ground and get it to a more mature level, we've created an Oml assessment that takes the best practices of successful technology companies who are offering as a service and financing and creates benchmarks for you to help you create opportunities for growth. So just as an example, if you're an OML 1, you just prefer clients pay cash. You're OML 2 and 3, you're reactive to clients asking for financing. But if you're OML 4 and 5, where Alex had gone to, you're proactively talking about financing and educating your clients on the ability to pay for their investment over time. So if you want to benchmark where you're at today, we have a tool that can do that for you. And then we'll have a conversation to talk about next steps to get you to the next level. So if you do want to do that today, I think they put the link in the chat to take the Haas OML assessment. It's only 5 questions. It's nothing crazy, but then we'll schedule some time to go through that with you and talk about next steps.
Awesome.
All right. And with that, By all means, by the way, come harass all of us on LinkedIn. We're all out there somewhere. It's a little game of hide and seek to come find us, but do follow us on LinkedIn and we'll have these conversations with you as well. Lifecycle is offering a 50% off your first 2 months coupon with the code GreatAmerica. So if you decide from watching this webinar that you want to work more with your clients on budgeting, on strategic forecasting, on setting up that strategic business review or quarterly business review that really works for your customers, come join us on Tuesday. We will have Taco Tuesday and we will taco about QBRs. Because we do corny marketing really well over here. And then we offer everyone a free trial. After your free trial, you can use the coupon code GreatAmerica to get 50% off 2 paid months. So that's what we got going on.
Perfect. Any questions in the chat?
Everybody's been quiet. We either answered everything or we lulled them to sleep.
Well, I'll give them a sec. But Taylor, I'm super glad that we got to join up and do this. I certainly see the synergies, as they say in the space, right, of how it makes sense, of course, in a business review to have this conversation, because who wants to just call up to have a finance conversation?
And to that point, I see some Lifecycle partners in the room. If you're doing leasing and doing hardware as a service today, and you're not sure how to get that properly reflected on your budget and in your contracts in Lifecycle Insights, do let us know. Just shoot us an email. You guys know where to find Marnie and I. We're all over the place, but ping us somewhere and we'll walk through it with you and show you exactly how to document those so that they show up properly on your budget, but you're still replacing that gear on the right life cycles and all that kind of stuff. We've got some tips and tricks to make leasing and hardware and rentals and all that kind of stuff play really nice with the system.
Perfect.
All right. Well, with no questions, somebody's going to get 8 minutes back in their day, and they're probably going to have to answer one of those 4,500 trouble tickets with it.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
Taylor,
you guys
so much.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
day.
Take
Have
care.
good ones, everyone.